Hello everyone and welcome back. So in this MMO roundtable video we're going to kick things off with a discussion of real estate. I am sure there are those of you out there that may find this a bit strange as our first topic as opposed to many of the other fundamental things you may find in a game. But this is the whole world that we're looking at creating is going to provide us the ability to take advantage of real estate. First thing I want to say right off the bat, there's been a lot of people saying, why do you want to make a huge world? You know, the size of World of Warcraft, that's huge already. And if you look at that, you don't need anything bigger than that. Well, in World of Warcraft, even on the server that we play on, if you allow everyone to be able to purchase land, then it won't be long before all the land's been purchased.
Yeah, before everything is private property, so to speak.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not looking at let's take the world and divide it up into a giant grid, and anyone can buy any sector within the grid. But because we're going to end up with zones where you can buy area and not buy area, etc.
Right.
But if you look at being able to own real estate, and then you look at World of Warcraft, you quickly run into a problem where there's just not that much land to deal with. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we would really like to see, or me personally, this is something I would really like to see in the game. So with
I think it's a great idea to have the ability to own a chunk of anything. I mean, even in WoW, if there was, say, a building in the middle of Orgrimmar, yes, because we play for the Horde. If there was a building in Orgrimmar that I could step into and I could own a little instanced room, and that was it. I couldn't actually see it on the map. I couldn't even see it in the city. But even knowing that I had my own place I could go into, that would be tremendous.
First thing I'd want to do with that would just be able to store stuff that I don't want in my bank, that I'm not necessarily having to quickly find access to.
Yeah.
Some of the stupid holiday things that you get that's like really cool, but you hate the fact that it's taking up a bank slot or a back
even
slot.
better. Like what if the achievements that you had came with like little trophies or plaques or things?
That'd be cool.
Then, you have your own like museum of how awesome you are that you can walk through. I mean, that's just the idea is cool.
So this is something that's really important. This dictates us requiring a larger world than what we see in World of Warcraft, which is why Lee's been doing so much research into giving us large worlds. And there's been some very interesting progress that I can't really talk about right now that we've not recorded lately, but we will be sharing with everyone very soon. And I see us being able to have the space to do this. So with that, Zach, you've already got a few things written down that we can just kind of start working our way through and discussing. Sure.
Well, we had already said right off the bat early on that owning homes or some kind of land would be a really major thing that we really wanted to do. And I think there's even some games coming up, like, what is it, Aeon version 3?
Aeon 3 is going to allow you to,
you can have your own home. And I'd like
to... MMOs are going to be going in this direction.
Yeah, it's already being done. And, of course, there's the whole Second Life thing, where that's kind of what Second Life revolves around.
Absolutely. And then, as Nelson said in the last video, let's not forget Galaxies.
Sure, yeah. And Galaxies had it as well. Of course, I don't think it did when it first started out, but that was a long time ago.
If it didn't, it was really soon because
I don't remember. I played that game for a really short amount of time when it first came out. But anyway, we already said we wanted homes, but I was wondering at the feasibility of having more than just a home. What if you actually had a fairly large tract of land that you could do things with more than just a house? So let me start writing some ideas down. Of course, you'd want some sort of home or domicile. Let's just say a house. But, there's no reason why it couldn't be a castle or a fort or a bunker, whatever it is you think you want to live in. But some other ideas, too, that I think could be really cool are like farms.
And again,
or stores.
Or stores.
Exactly.
And we said this in the last video that we're going to have crossover here. These are things that would definitely affect economy.
Sure.
I want to bring up something is in games that you can own a house, and I could bring up the Assassin's Creed 2, the villa, or Star Wars Galaxies, the houses, or even Minecraft where you build houses. Each one of those cases, owning houses actually gave you something back.
Right.
And actually, it gave you an incentive in the game to do it. In the case of Minecraft, it's for protection. In the case of the villa, you get more money. In the case of Star Wars Galaxies, you can build resources and have mining operations and stuff.
Right.
And so I think that's important to define, is what could the virtual benefits of owning a house be, and why would there be an incentive to do so?
Well, see, what I was thinking were, other things than a house, for instance, could just be a nice place to store stuff. I like the idea. Okay, let me rephrase that slightly. I hate the idea of WoW's bank handling. I've never really liked the bank. It's more of a safety deposit thing, and it doesn't hold very much. And I understand that from a logistical standpoint, but it's like, if I could own a house, why can't I just fill the attic space or the basement space, or even some little virtual box that sits in a corner like Resident Evil that seems to be infinitely filled, or just keep my stuff there and not have to worry about the whole bank tab thing. I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I hated the idea of bank tabs. Part of it is, I'm sure, from a server side or from some back end side, there's got to be some kind of limit on how much junk somebody can hold. Or maybe not. I mean, that's just the only reason I could even fathom why you'd want to have that. And I'm not trying to make guesses on the technicalities of it, but I thought it'd be cool, like, if all your house really did was give you like, in terms of a bonus, in terms of benefit, was just give you a place that you could store your stuff. Even that would be cool. But at the same time, if it came with other benefits, like it's a place you can always go to rest and gain a certain kind of buff, from sleeping there. That kind of takes me back to some of the other things I was, talking about doing with your land. Is what if you could add on farms? It wasn't just farms too. I had some other ideas too, like fortifications. And apparently I can't write. Fortifications. And the reason I threw this out is it seems like as soon as you give players the ability to have a house, somebody else is going to want to attack that house. And the real decision here is, do you want to allow house raids to take place? And do you want somebody to be able to come over onto your land and beat the snot out of your house for some reason, even if they can't destroy it? Like, let's say you want to keep people generally happy. Again, a game is about letting people have fun. And if somebody spent a long time building up, the most awesome house ever, if it's possible that could be destroyed and have to be rebuilt, while realistic, that's going to irritate some people. It's why most MMOs these days don't have permanent death. They have some means that you can come back to life, be it through classic resurrection or cloning or something, because you don't want to work on a character forever and ever and ever, only to have somebody come up, cut his throat, that's it, start over from level 1 again. I think a house should be the same way, but it becomes irrelevant if you don't want to allow people to attack or raid or do anything with your house.
I was just thinking, I mean, even if you didn't want to allow people to attack an area of land, you could still use fortifications.
Sure, just to irritate people who pass by.
Or no, with creatures.
Yeah.
Because you could let creatures wander into the area, and perhaps you want to hire some NPC guards or get some turrets or something.
Well, also, I mean, you could consider that the farther away that you put your house from an establishment, from a city, from something, the easier it is for that to be attacked. However, the further away you put a house, the more potential benefit you gain from mining resources or having a farm or something.
Sure.
So there's a risk-reward benefit in that case.
Oh, and I also kind of want to mention here, farms is a really, really generic term.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking this could go in a lot of directions. Like, you could plant an orchard. If you have a profession where you're gathering wood or some sort of herbs or plants or something, so you plant that, where you're capable of doing that, so that you can just go gather it. It'll grow back up every day or every couple of days. Basically, you have a set area that you've cordoned off, and you're growing these things with a certain respawn time. If you are maybe doing like a skinning style profession or some sort of animal gathering, it could be gathering fur, it could be gathering body parts, I don't know. But you could raise those animals right there on your land. If you have a metal sort of gathering, because I mean a lot of games will have you gather ore and you refine that into metal X, then maybe you start a mine on your terrain so that you can start actually going and picking out some sort of mineral.
Right. Now let me add to that, and well, this adds to the whole thing. First of all, where do you get real estate from? If we want to jot this down somewhere, I'm proposing that you purchase real estate from agents.
Okay.
So we can just say real estate agents for now. It's not like you go out into the land and just stick a flag down in it and say this tract is mine.
Oh.
No homesteading.
So no homesteading or claim jumping or anything.
That's right. And there's reasons that I have this in mind. One, that means we as the designers control where people can build and where people can't build.
Yeah, you've got to centralize it anyway.
And that's one. Number two, and this is something I mentioned to you earlier, Zach, and something that Lee could easily be able to add in, is as the terrain system all gets baked out and is what ends up getting handed off to clients, we can give the terrain certain properties that I think are really cool. When a person goes to purchase a tract of land from a realtor, what if that tract of land, it's kind of like a perk test. What if with the land it wasn't good for, it didn't have good soil, as an example, for growing certain types of plants? Or what if there are no easily reachable rock, stone, anything that we could dig down to and mine at this particular location? So basically, and again, it's just a high-level idea that could be refined further later, but what if when a person goes to buy a tract of land, they actually have to think about more than just, oh, that's pretty, it's nice, and it's economical. They also may need to consider, what do I want to do with my land other than just have a house that I'm storing stuff in? So then they would have to look closely at the property they're buying, and will it facilitate what they're wanting to do with it? For instance, grow some particular kind of plant that may not have a very very realistic, maybe it'll grow, but instead of getting a nice, lot of whatever it is that's growing, maybe it only grows very sparsely, or you get very little out of it. These are properties that I could see us easily being able to design from a design point of view, and it gives a gamer something more to have to consider when purchasing land.
Right. And go ahead, please, Nelson.
Oh, sorry, I just want to say I had a really stupid idea for something that might cross into the gaming, the mini-game level, or a thing that you're talking about before. But it maybe, again, this is a really stupid idea, but what if you had, you predetermined as the game designers what areas were purchasable, but you made some sort of game about having players go out and explore those lands and those areas, and then going back to realtors to tell them what they found and what places have mine. You know what I mean?
You're talking about surveyors?
Yeah.
Yeah, surveyors, exactly.
That's not a dumb idea at all.
Basically you take what we've decided are going to be the developable areas, but then you kind of obscure that one level by saying it has to be surveyed first.
Right, and then those places would, of course, they would have NPC, or not NPCs, but mobs on them, so there would be a danger to surveying this, so it would be, more engaging, but that could be just a sort of game or something you could do.
Yeah, I definitely like giving something to explorers, people who like to get out and explore and find stuff. I love that stuff personally.
There's two of your professions. You've got your surveyor, and then you've got the guy that's got to go out and clear the tracts of land of all the mobs. So you got your exterminator.
Yeah, they're always good. You got grinders in every MMO out there. You could find some.
So, Leonard, do you have any thoughts to this?
Not that are coming to mind that haven't already been mentioned, because raisins, I think, is something it's been said.
Okay. I do think that how earlier we had mentioned things such as stores. Obviously, those stores are going to need to be manned, and these could be. It would be interesting if the person themselves could man it, or if somebody in their guild could man it. Or if you hired, and employment is something that I wanted to talk about a little bit over in the economy section, but, what if you were able to hire NPCs to actually, is it giving you trouble?
No, I just hit the button. I'm going to actually pry that off real quick.
But if you had NPCs that you could hire that could run the store, and I know this kind of gets more into the world of the economics again, or the economy. All of this is going to kind of bleed over and all, but when you have stores on there, you still need to stock it with something.
Yeah, for stocking, I was sitting there thinking, like in WoW, we have different characters that are able to make things, like your leather workers, et cetera, et cetera. And so what you would do is you would have some professions yourself, maybe. You make some stuff, but you go out exploring to find other places that have unique items that you then purchase and bring back to your store that other people can buy from you. So you can kind of move different things around as you find them.
Sure, like your classic trade games, freelancer and whatnot.
And however we would get it up to speed, I still think, and this goes into part of making the world much more dynamic, but let's say you've got a store that sells to jump over into the whole RPG MMO world of games like WoW, some sort of like mana potion or something, or milk. It's nice to see it not have an infinite supply and be able to run out, but if you have an NPC that you're paying to work there, the moment you start running low, the NPC knows he needs to get more. That NPC automatically generates a quest for anybody who happened to stumble across it, where he may be looking for more supplies that somebody could take and go out and perform that quest. And this is something, Lee, that we talked about a long time ago, because having NPCs that are truly doing something in the world, such as supplying people with goods at a store, and then responding accordingly as supplies start to get low, and supplies could even run out because then you can't buy that item from the NPC. And these turning into
adjust the prices of sales. So as if you're at a blacksmith or something and he's selling, +1 swords or whatever, and he's only got 10, so he's got them for a certain price. When he gets down to 5, the price goes up a little bit. So when he's down to 2, the price is even more. When he's on his last one, that's when the price will be at its highest.
Right.
The only thing I would stipulate, and I could be maybe way off base or maybe completely counter to what you'd envisioned, I would say that the staffing is just always automatically going to be NPC based. Because you're just thinking about like all stores that I've ever been to, whoever's running the store is really just a vector to open up some sort of a trade window. And at worst, if you've actually got somebody on the other end, they're going to have to be dragging stuff into the trade window and handling that manually. I'm there. I just want to buy something.
The only game I've seen...
Go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say, I've seen a game that is slightly different. If you've ever played the original EverQuest, they, as far as I know, were the very first game that really had a player-based auction house where you created a character that you put all the goods that you wanted to sell on that character. It was automated. You parked your character in one of the auction house stalls with all of your items on it. You set the prices for every one of your items. And what would happen is, as your character came in, you were playing, if you wanted to buy something, you would open up, you'd get the auction house dialogue, and you would look at all the items that were available, find what you wanted, and you would have competing sellers. You'd find your seller, and you'd click a button that was find the seller, and you'd get this little guide arrow that you'd follow through the auction house that took you to that other player's character that was in the auction house selling the goods for them. So it's kind of a cross. It was a real character, but it was being controlled by an NPC. So you had to park one of your characters in the auction house to sell your goods.
See, what I was thinking, like even in WoW, the only thing we're missing in Orgrimmar is everybody having their own little virtual thing around them with a title across the top so you know what it is they're selling.
Right.
Because we're in WoW and we are doing actual human-to-human transactions with people. At least I have so many times where I'm giving somebody some gold and they're giving me something that I'm purchasing from them. And I'm not saying that we couldn't do that here. Obviously, we could.
Right. But
the idea is in the store has a stock room and the ability to carry a lot more than you do on your person. And I agree with you. Most people are probably not going to want to sit at a store. I thought it would be kind of cool if you gave that as an option. Most people would just simply say, I'm going to hire an NPC that's going to run this and here's what we sell. But by leaving it as an option, you do have the ability to try to make a reputation of your prices aren't set in stone. You'll haggle with people, and or trying to come up with any means to encourage people to want to come visit your property. Some people will want people to visit, and some people won't.
Sure, yeah, I can see that.
So that was just kind of what I was thinking. Though, of course, with most people that are going to want to trade like that, they're going to end up getting what it is they have that they want to trade and go into town and try to trade there. So, anyways, that's just so that you kind of had a picture of what I was thinking.
I do see an issue, though, and I hate that this goes into yet another one of the topics.
That's fine.
But the issue is that people are going to want to start to become competitive. They're going to be able to want to create things for the least amount of money and sell them for the least amount of money.
That already takes place now in all of the MMOs.
Well, I realize that, but what's going to happen is you're going to have guilds, and you're going to have guilds creating monopolies. And that could be an awesome thing, but that's also, just like in real life, it's going to destroy the little guys. It's going to destroy the small businesses. And how would you combat that? How would you combat an entire guild who has their own mining operations, their own skinning operations, their own crafting operations, and their own store operations? And that's obviously a huge part of the game that could be really fun for people. But how could you make that not destroy the desire?
Well, the thing is that's going to be part of the gameplay. If you're really upset about that, and you're one of the small guys, and you're getting undercut by this large corporation or this large guild, then get together with your fellow players, form your own guild, and compete against them.
But in real life, we have antitrust laws. We wouldn't have the same thing in the MMO. So your only protection would be to band together with your friends. But again, if you don't have any, then...
But see, it gives you an interesting way to try to enforce or to encourage the whole multiplayer part of this. The point of playing multiplayers, and I know there's a lot of people that like to play multiplayer games by themselves, and I happen to be one of them, but one of the things that people are... From an MMO point of view, you want to encourage people to play with other people and form groups and do things together. Otherwise, if you wanted everybody to play by themselves, you wouldn't be making an MMO.
And in this particular situation with the example that you've stated, Nelson, even in World of Warcraft, I don't see it as a problem because
it doesn't matter.
In fact,
stance on it.
I find it. I find it actually quite fun being a single person and actually running a particular price for something in the auction house way up. That's a mini game inside of WoW that I've had a blast with several times. Zach, you remember when my brother and I just absolutely destroyed the potions market.
Yeah. Well, the reason we have antitrust laws in the real world is because it is in fact the real world. And it's not like you can just step outside right now and go kill some little tiny goblin creature in your front yard who's going to spawn again in 5 minutes, by the way. And he's just going to drop, 23 copper into your lap that came literally out of nowhere. A game's economy is often driven by that sort of thing. And frankly, if the game gets big enough where that sort of thing is a significant problem, then I say you analyze it then, but even in games as big as World of Warcraft, it happens, but it's not that much of an issue. What ends up happening is you have some great big, group of people, or usually it's just one person, and that's just how it is. Most folks, from what I've seen, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, it's just what I've seen, aren't going to go through the effort of banding together just to monopolize one single facet of the economy in a game when the game is really about doing all kinds of other things like running around in dungeons and killing monsters. But even if they did, so they mess with the price of this one item, it'll fluctuate. It'll balance back out. People will find a way to cope with it. The price gets driven down for this, and so there's less demand. Other people will start picking up other things that they can sell. It will level itself out. Now, if my thing is the only way you could fix that and get around it is if you took the invisible hand approach and you as the game designer jumped in and started physically changing things about the economy to protect that, and I'm really against that. I think the economy will find some kind of an equilibrium in something like that.
No, I agree. I guess my question would be, and you've already answered this, would you want to encourage this because it could be lots of fun, or would you want to discourage this because it might damage individuals' experience? But
I'd say let it happen.
I say let it happen too.
Yeah.
It's all part of the immersive gameplay. If it happens, it happens.
And I do agree. It would be really cool to be part of that guild who came up with a way to manufacture this good for 10 times cheaper than everybody else. That would be lots of fun for that guild.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, even if they did corner the market, they're going to get bored of it.
Exactly.
They'll move on, do something else in, a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks.
Because here's the deal, like and this is, I'd really like to. Let me say this, then it'd be great if we could get away.
Well, actually, Leonard's been trying to say something.
Oh,
repeatedly.
Leonard! Oh, yeah. Come on, Leonard.
I was just going to say one of the things that could happen too with smaller guys is, say, the big guild. They're monopolizing a lot of the regular, say, leather armors and fancy potions. But this other little guy, he discovers that, hey, way off in this other island, there's this particular spice that nobody knows about. I'm going to really stock that heavy with the recipes for it and make a killing. And the big guys don't know a thing about it. It's going to force the little guys to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Find new things.
Yeah. And that depends on how many recipes can be made available, but that's getting really far away.
Okay, yeah. So let's
real estate.
Bring it back to real estate. So the idea of building stores is cool. Actually, my problem with stores, and I think we should have it. I'm not saying we should get rid of it, but my concern with doing it is that if we have, okay, hang on. Let me try to put it in a context that makes some sort of sense. Let's say this square represents our primary game world. This is where this is all of the content that we've designed. So you've got all of your cities in here, all of the areas that we think you can explore, all your dungeons. Basically, if you took like all of WoW's world, you could crush it into here. We're basically saying that we want areas outside of this, and of course it wouldn't be a perfect grid. I realize that this is very much generalized. It would be areas beyond this that people would be developing.
Yeah, that's not what I was picturing.
What are you picturing? Because at some point, this area is finite. And highly finite. Extremely finite.
But do you remember Star Wars Galaxies? I wish I could draw right here, but basically what it looks like is you have... I'm trying to draw with my mouse. You have these huge circles, or these huge planets, and the planets have... cities that are what you're talking about, the game world, that have all the quests, the NPCs, and the cities are spread in these planets. They're at the top left corner, the top right corner,
sure,
whatever. And in the center, that's where people develop on. And there are even cities or planets in Star Wars Galaxies where there's maybe 1 or 2 outposts, and everything else on that planet is developable.
I was picturing more along the lines of, let's say you've got these nine squares here. I would say we scatter our cities and our towns all throughout, and then we scatter. That's why, again, it comes down to the developer's mark.
Sure, but aren't you conceptually then just saying, all right, well, basically that just means another 9 grid where this is city
A, if you want to draw it that way,
and this is city B?
Huh?
Well, okay, if you...
Picture that the size of Alaska.
This guy?
No, the whole thing.
All right, cool.
I mean, you could just draw it as a box and just put little dots and say these are cities, and then because it's a very I mean, because we're talking about a world where there are ways to so there's cities. Why couldn't we have because we're going to have means of travel by like ships and stuff that will let you get great distances far.
Okay. Well, are you looking or do you want any control whatsoever as for where people develop?
Well, that's all controlled on what you sell them. So what you do is you define on a patch by patch what tracts of land are for sale, because there's nothing that says it's got to be a 1-to-1. So a patch isn't just going up for sale. You could have an odd-shaped collection of adjoining patches that go up for sale as a piece of property, and then that could be in between some other features that aren't sellable. So you could have some of the artist created terrain right next to a tract of sellable land, surrounded by maybe a city with, on the other side of that, a whole bunch of other tracts of sellable land, all mixed together. because we have the ability of breaking it down and going, okay, this patch and this patch are all part of this tract of land that we're going to sell, but we're going to take these other sets of patches and mark those as unsellable.
Okay.
No, I was just waiting because you were. I just was telling you how I was picturing it, but you were getting toward your concerns.
Well, my actual concern was that it seems like with anything, the land near the cities is going to be snarfed up the first.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all of the hardcores, all the early joiners, they're going to want the land that's closest to the cities. So the people who join in later are going to be further away from the cities, and it's going to make less and less sense for them to even worry about a store.
But the store's not a requirement. It's just something.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
And that's only if you open up those tracts of land for sale. Nothing says that we have to sell the stuff next to the cities first.
But you're forgetting the inevitableness of the world being finite. Eventually it will be filled up, given enough time. I mean, it's just a matter of drawing or figuring out a way to mitigate that, not remove it.
Not technically, because the way that we're designing this thing, if it all pans out, you just open up another continent.
Okay.
And you just keep going.
But the areas around City A, once all those areas are built on, they're built on.
Yes.
And that's just inevitable. This isn't, it's not static. And that's kind of the definition or the basis of this entire system.
Sure.
So you can't be afraid of that eventuality.
No, and I'm probably just I'm worried about it way too quickly. But what the concern I had was that the folks who are close to the cities where people are going to be flocking, it makes sense for them to build a store. Where if I jump into the game a year later, that the prime land won't really be available anymore. And as much as I'd like to have a store, because that's actually one of the reasons I bought the game, it doesn't make much sense because the only land I could get is way out here in the sticks, where it takes somebody a full minute to fly out here anyway.
And then you become a supplier for the stores.
Right.
Yes, either that or once we start talking about travel and quests and guilds and, everything else that isn't real estate, there will be, I hope that something that I kind of envisioned, that I don't know if anybody else shares this vision, but that people will be involved outside the main cities, that people will be walking around the areas, that people will need to stop by and buy a potion when they're out in the middle of the wilderness doing something, whatever that something is.
Sure, like I said, it may be something that's not even worthy of concern, but it is a thought that crossed my mind. I was just trying to get it out.
Well, here's another way. What if we didn't really sell the land? Let's say the corporations own the land, and you're leasing the land from the corporation. So
because what you're saying is very important, and that was something we were going to be getting to, and that is for paying for your land, because whether it be leasing or it be a tax that you have to pay, you really want to make sure you encourage your landowner or owners, which we'll also get to that in a few minutes.
They have to upkeep
They have to upkeep it. So they have to
lose it.
They have to do something in the game to earn the money to turn around and pay their taxes on it to the corporation or whoever to maintain their land, so that land doesn't go up for sale and somebody else end up getting it.
Right. And then you could perhaps, for people who want to have a house but don't want to deal with that, maybe you could have areas really far away from cities where they can have their houses that don't have as much upkeep or perhaps are free or something. It's just the only issue I see with the upkeep is that now a player can't walk away from the game for a year and come back and have his place back.
Actually, I'm fine with that because they can keep their character. Their character is always going to be theirs and stored on the server. But we can have it potentially, and I realize, don't throw something at me if you work on a server when I say this, but you can theoretically have infinite number of characters in, as a part of your server, but you only have so much land. So if you are the kind of person who's like, well, I'm going to walk away from the game for a year. When I come back, I better find my house. No. There are other players who need that land just as bad. Actually, they need it worse than you because they're actually in the world. You're not even in the world. So yeah, you lose that. Goodbye. See you. It doesn't matter. You still keep your character. It's not like anybody needs your character for anything. He can just go into quote unquote cold storage until you come back.
Yeah. Here's another way to look at it, Nelson. It's really not any different than World of Warcraft right now. Because I've lost tens of thousands in gold because of something that gets sent to your mailbox. You have 30 days to get it out of your mailbox. So you have to do some sort of upkeep, if you want to look at it that way, by logging in the game at least once every 30 days and getting your crap out of the mailbox. I mean, I've had times where I've had items, very, very expensive items, expire on the auction house, but unfortunately I didn't get into World of Warcraft for 2 months, and when I came back, my mailbox was empty. It was all gone, just gone.
Yeah.
So it's something that you have to be aware of even in that game now.
Right.
But I could also see this potentially cascading into horribleness. Like if a person owns 5 lots of land and then he goes bankrupt and he doesn't have the money to pay his upkeep, at that point,
in the real world, if you go bankrupt, do you get to keep your house?
Yeah, I wouldn't really worry about that. Specifically because the amount of land is finite. Like I said, if he can't keep up, then there are other people who actually need that land apparently more than he does.
I just like the idea of there being some sort of level of responsibility that's required from the player if they want to, because you don't have to own land to play the game.
Right.
No, I completely agree. All I'm suggesting is that there might be some place outside of the hot zones where you can own a house forever, and that can be your place.
I would personally, I would never make it where anybody could own any part of my server forever.
Yeah, agreed.
Period. Because unless they want to pay me thousands and thousands of dollars to
real dollars.
Yeah, real dollars to actually upkeep that part of the server and make sure it's always there.
Because what if that guy,
what if he walks away and just
never
he completely
plays...
quits the game and never comes back? That piece of land, it just became like a bad sector on my hard drive.
But I'm talking about places really far away, somewhere that you could have your own home that never goes away. And the reason why is I'm calling it a home. It's not some place you rent. The psychological impact would be that this is your home. This is where you can always return to.
It doesn't have to be called some place you rent if you want to call it a tax on the land.
Have you ever gone through the country?
No, Nelson doesn't get out of...
Yeah.
I have been to Utah, as far as Utah before.
Whoa.
Wow. Have you ever seen derelict properties with houses and cabins that are just falling apart? If you don't go to a piece of property, it falls apart and the land will reclaim it. If the person goes away and they don't come back and they don't upkeep the land, it goes away, even in the remotest parts of the world.
But I just like the idea of having something.
Sure,
that is
everybody in this world likes the idea of being able to give something
forever.
And it's theirs forever. Even if they decide to give the middle finger to the game itself, it's always theirs. And I definitely appreciate your feedback. This is just one that I'm going to say no on.
Well, and here's just, let me kind of draw. Okay, I realize what you're saying. All right, so what I was trying to get at earlier. With this little grid thing was like if this represented, of course it wouldn't really be a grid, but if this represented all of our design space, you're going to want to build outside of that. But even as what you're suggesting, if this was miles and miles away, if this takes a full 10 minutes worth of travel to a civic center, and this is out in the middle of, nowhere. You know what I was going to say. You'd have this broken up into different tracks that people can buy. Now, if what you're saying, if we went with that, then I could come in and I could buy this land. Awesome. It's mine. I walk away from the game. I never come back. Now I've got people living here and here and here. But this whole area of land in the middle is now useless in terms of the game. Like I said, it's exactly like a bad sector on a hard drive.
Okay. And I don't want to hold up the...
Yeah, and that's why I said I definitely appreciate your input on it. But I don't have a problem with adapting a little bit of what you're saying by saying that these are lands or these are areas that would be less desirable, so their tax is much, much cheaper. But I just don't like the idea of saying it's permanently theirs forever.
You can simplify things like, okay, I would make it where if somebody, if this is a free-to-play model, then it's less relevant. But if it wasn't, if it was a subscription base, you have a warning comes up. If you cancel your account, you're going to lose your land. Just know that. If it's free to play, then people can just walk away. And they may not be the kind who wants to go in and delete their character. It's free to play. They didn't invest anything to get in. They don't need to worry about leaving. They just get up and walk out. But it'd be nice to tie that in with a server so you get some sort of an email from the team and just says, hey, we just thought you'd like to know you haven't been paying your land upkeep and you're about to lose all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think that's about as fair as you can get, because then they can make the intelligent decision in the real world of, oh, do I even care about that? No. And if they don't care, reclaim it. Let's hand it to somebody else.
Oh, it'd be hilarious. You send them a foreclosure notice in their email on their account. It's like, when you haven't paid your taxes.
Yeah, make it look official. I agree. That'd be awesome.
You've gone up for closure.
Until you get sued because somebody actually thinks you're foreclosing their real house and it scared them, and you get sued for mental anguish. And
it's like, if you don't jump in the game within 30 days and pay your taxes, it's going up for auction.
And your late fees.
Yeah, exactly.
And your late fees.
Okay, the other thing that I want to discuss about this that I think is important, so upkeep taxes was one. The other is who can purchase. And what I mean by that is I see us dividing it into two areas, individuals and what we're just at the moment going to term guilds, just because that's a common term that's being thrown around. Nelson, I think you had thrown this out in one of the radio shows, and we have discussed it here at different times as well. It would be really, really cool if a guild was able to own an entire town.
Sure.
Well,
and the way you'd handle that is that individuals can have a small piece of land, or smallish piece of land, where a guild can have, by default, a large block of land that they can divide up however they want to.
That's one way, or the other way is, and maybe that's the way, I'm just throwing this out there. If somebody in the game busts their butt to get rich, and they want to buy a bunch of land together, a bunch of tracts, let them. It's the monthly upkeep for it's going to be very expensive. Sure. If it's a guild, with the guild, you could make it a requirement that everybody in the guild has to contribute in maintaining this land.
Well, I still think there should be some sort of cap on how much land anybody can own. I really do, because, well, I don't know. It just seems like at some point you're going to have that person who just does nothing but live in the game, and that's great and all. Who just not only monopolizes, but literally you can't buy land because this one dude owns it all.
What about if you make it spread out? You force it to be spread out. You can only buy one tract, and then the next tract you buy has to be 15 away. Then you can still buy as many as you want, but then you won't have the issue with one person buying out the entire front of a city.
No, see, I like the idea of not having a cap, or not a hard cap. Do it a little bit differently. The more land you have, the higher proportion of taxes that you've got. So it's almost like a land baron tax.
Absolutely. That's why I was just picturing with what Zach was saying. If this guy owned all the land, his monthly bill is astronomical. The amount of gameplay he must be doing to earn a tremendous amount of money to pay for it. It would be there would have to be a point where he would just physically not be capable of generating that much
trick
income.
It seems to that then, because that's certainly another way to do it. I mean that imposes a non-capped system where you have like cost to land ratio, and instead of leaving that as a linear curve, go ahead and start sweeping it up.
Yep.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
So that instead of it's like, okay, I have one block of land that cost me 10 credits a month. Now I have 2 blocks of land. It costs me 50 credits a month. I have 3 blocks of land. It costs me like 200 credits a month. And it keeps incrementing like that. And then it's like, all right, you can own a lot of land, but you got to bust your ass to keep it.
And these exact equations on how we come up with these numbers can be discussed later. But I definitely like the idea if an individual wanted to buy and create their own little town. Because I would personally want to try to achieve something like that, without necessarily being in a guild to be able to do that.
Sure.
And you do the same thing with the guilds, but just on a larger scale. So then it becomes almost a status symbol of what guild owns the most land and can maintain the most land. Mm-hmm. Because then you can go, well, that's a guild that's got their act together. They're really prosperous if they hold hundreds of square kilometers of terrain across different parts of the world.
And the cool thing about that particular guild, all of their players are having to do a lot of playing in the game to make sure that the gold's coming in to pay for it. And then, of course, they're not going to want to lose it, because if we get to something which we could actually put a little discussion of this in here, something I talked about with Zach, which was, and this is going to sound absolutely crazy, so you guys just have to help massage this into an idea. But even in World of Warcraft, you have to get into the cities before you get your trade chat and all that, going by with everyone trying to sell stuff and all that. With people being able to buy land and people getting some sort of achievements, promotions, whatever, you could end up with a virtual news system that exists inside the world. And you could come up with ways of, again, here's why it's going to sound silly. Let's just look at it like internet.
Sure.
We have our ISP that's in town here, and, there's all the news out there. But to get the news here to the house so that we could surf through and all that, we have to have internet brought here to the house. So you could have information feeds that, or something like that, that could be something that you could add into your property, something that then becomes available at all of your houses or whatever, that would allow you to access news. Mm-hmm. So then people who lose land, you could end up with only because I could see myself doing this, and you know how much I love playing the auction house. Someone who's just constantly watching the news for people who just lost property because the bank foreclosed on it or the corporation foreclosed and is going to turn around and resell it, maybe at a discounted price because of that or whatever. But and that gets back to the guild thing, where you're going to have people that are going to be very proud of what they've built up to, and they're not going to want to lose it. So
right.
Because especially if it's publicized and you're like the number one guild on the server. Anyways, it's now quiet. Everybody's like, "Yeah, he's done lost his mind."
I'm writing.
No.
I'm trying to figure out what you
that.
meant by the news stuff. At first, it sounded like you were talking about having to almost like run a networking through land to cascade through.
No.
It did sound that way at first, but I think what he was really getting at is that the land activity, basically the real estate market, becomes a publicized thing.
Yeah, it's just like anything else. You know who's in bankruptcy because the court system.
Yeah, but it's to have that information readily available. I would see it as, since we're doing this high tech in the future from the human side, you'd want to be you need to go into a town. Go to a kiosk or something, since we're going to make actually interacting with devices an important part of the game as we get further into it. So you're going to need to go to a public kiosk. And
you've already got to buy your land from agents anyway, so you just have that as one of the features.
As one of the things. That's exactly what I was thinking. So imaginably,
which makes sense. Your real estate agents already know what is and isn't for sale anyway.
Right. So if I was in World of Warcraft and I had my own little place somewhere, wouldn't it be awesome if I could say, I want to be able to just sit down and interface with the auction house right here, so I don't have to always go
so you were talking about both things at once.
Well,
he was saying he wanted...
You're covering two topics at the same time.
Yeah.
One is the ability to basically get like trade chat in your house.
Or not. Well, I was using chat as an example.
Yeah.
So,
or the auction house or anything.
Yes. To get.
Okay, fine. Let me get rid of trade chat, and then let's just change that to communication.
Some sort of service brought into your house.
And then at the same time, you also brought up the idea of the land status, real estate being publicized,
and that being the communication is the communication of news and information and all. But obviously we don't want real people having to do that. But that's what I was saying with people leveling up or getting achievements or buying land or land foreclosing. You could have a repository of news, just like you have the auction house. You can sit down in the auction house and you can surf through it looking for specific things. If you had this service in your land, now from your land, without having to go into a major city, I could surf through all of today's foreclosures, or I could. That's.
Yeah. But I mean, if you want to take like the high tech modern thing, and I'm sure the Alethians would have to come up with some sort of equivalent. Yeah. But I mean, like, okay, I don't need a house today. I can do all that on my iPhone right now. It's probably only going to get worse in the future.
No, what I was thinking. Here's an example.
And that
from WoW.
Oh, go ahead.
Example, not from WoW. How about like in Ender's Game? In the very first book, where Dad had his subscription to the boards and gave the kids access to it, where the services you're talking about are paid services, just like you're paying for your land. Your connection to the network and what you have access to is based on what you subscribe to. So if you're one that wants to buy land and look for foreclosures and stuff, you pay for that service, and that gets added to
absolutely.
your
And what I was just about to say to Zach when you jumped in with that was, he said, in our world right now we can look at the iPhone. Absolutely, but it's not free. It is a device that I had to go out and pay for.
Sure.
So I'm not thinking that every person who just comes into the game automatically has access to, or should have access to, all this information, no matter where they are in the game. I'm seeing public kiosks, and they actually did this in WoW too. If you think about it, engineers in Dalaran could look at the auction house and use it, but not everybody could just use it. You could go to a public city and use the public venue to access that information. So it's just one of the things I was thinking about. Go ahead, Nelson.
What about this? You have a free or cheap access to this virtual internet thing, but you pay for services that sort of make it more relevant to you. You pay for services that allow you to filter out the news items or things you're interested in. You pay for services that allow you to subscribe to certain plots of lands or certain corporations or certain guilds.
Sure,
but it's not necessarily what you pay. Not always do you have to pay for it.
Without even exactly, Zach. Just
because I don't like the idea of looking at a kiosk in the future. I like in the world today, everything that I ever could possibly want to know about is on the home screen of my phone.
Stop. That's because you purchased a phone.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, I think more important to having access to this kiosk device is having the information that you care about presented to you and notified to you.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing that I'm interested in with the wanting to take it, like having an iPhone and go mobile. When we get over to environments and we start talking about storms and things like that, I love the idea of the environment under certain situations can affect to where you no longer are able to get a necessary.
Those damn sunspots.
It could, whatever, but something that can affect you from being able to communicate. I mean, even in Zach's story, we look at the Alethians, the one side accusing the other side of doing something that is shrouding communications. And so what if certain Alethians had the ability to do something like that to try to prevent people from gaining access to information? And I don't even know how we could apply that yet. I'm just talking in general. But if you had that service available there at your house, because Nelson, you're right, you got a phone. I bet you got internet at your house too.
Yeah, that's how we're talking.
Exactly, but that's my point. You didn't just say, well, all I need is just this phone. You still have internet.
Right, but I guess my point does. I get what you're saying about that. My point is that I don't like the idea of having to go to a kiosk in your house or in a place, or even pick up a device in your hand and having to sift through a bunch of stuff.
Sure, I think and hang on, it doesn't have. No. Okay, I'm sorry if I made that sound wrong. The only thing about kiosks that I'm talking about are in the cities and towns, perhaps. At your house, it could be something as simple as a feed that comes in, and then anywhere around your property, you are under an umbrella where you can just use your device that you carry on you at all times, if you've purchased one, to just access data.
It's not so much if you're against the idea of it, it's a way of presenting it visually in a game. If it's a kiosk that you have to walk up to, there's a very easy way to display you walking up to a kiosk and opening up that interface to take up the view of your monitor so you can read the information. Okay. We can't simulate your little phone and you hold it up and it gets kind of weird then.
Stop. Everybody stop. You're absolutely right. And this is an entire lecture on its own, or discussion on its own. But just know that I personally like the idea of somehow being able to, I don't think in the game everybody should have access to all data at all times anywhere they're at. I like the idea, of course, of being able to gain access to a lot of this information without being in a city. It's one of the things that frustrates me in World of Warcraft, because in World of Warcraft, to go to the kiosk, which would be my auctioneer, I have to go to a city to get, and being able to have a device that allows me to just, anywhere I'm at is big to me. I like the idea, though, if I'm out adventuring deep in the woods, jungle, wherever, that storms could come up or something could come up and interfere with me having that ability, because that makes the whole gameplay much more dynamic because you just don't know. And
you don't have satellite reception.
Exactly. But if you had paid some small little fee for this service to be on your land, your device always works. Is all I'm getting at. Now we can revisit it later. It's just how I'm talking about us getting to data on our land. And like I say, everybody might think I'm crazy, but I
don't see where it would be that difficult.
No, it's not.
Because
No, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. So, yeah, I get it.
Because all you're talking about is different types of news feeds. That's going to be handled by a server that's broadcasting to whoever's subscribed to different types of things. Then all you're doing is putting a filter in that is an environmental filter. So depending on ranges and the type of terrain could be interfered with on its own. And that should be able to just filter out what you are able to see.
Yeah, it'll be easy to do. The last thing I want to say, because this does still tie into land and stores, it would be cool if by putting this feed in, one of the things that you automatically gain out of it is now if you have a store on property and people are searching stuff in a city or wherever they may be, they automatically search your store too, to see if you have something in stock. So now it makes it worth you having that service in your little town or your little tract of land, because you know everyone else that may be looking at the service looking for automatically. You don't have to go into a city and broadcast and try to tell people, look, I'm selling this gym. Come here. It's available.
That's the only thing that I was going to say, because I was trying not to let this go too much further into the realm of just discussing communication. But that would be my only concern that would have to be addressed, is making sure that if you can run this to your home as opposed to having it attached to your character, what would be the significant benefit of doing that? Because in the end, you are what your character can do. And if you can say to Nelson, of course you can run the internet on your phone, but you still have it in your house. That's because you want to use it on your screen with your mouse and keyboard. Our players are already sitting
For me, I disagree. It's because I want reliable internet here.
All things being equal,
cell phones.
Okay.
I'm just saying I think a lot of the if we lived in Nashville, that almost wouldn't be an issue, but we live here in Dixon, out here in the sticks, and so you absolutely have a point. But I'm just saying, I think you'd want ways to make sure that it was worth your while to pay to have it on your house and on your character, given the fact that if it's on your character, you can already use it.
And yeah, that's kind of what I said at the beginning of this, is I think that everything that you can do to your house needs to give you something back.
Yeah, and
I really do like that idea of having your stores being able to have.
Well, I think Jason was trying to describe it more as a property upgrade. You put a communication relay on your property. That means when you're in vicinity of your property,
I understood that from the get-go.
Yeah, and I hope you guys don't shoot this one down, but I'm a big fan of the idea of there being turbulent weather systems that could come up and you become cut off. I like that idea. I mean, in WoW, you're always cut off, except for talking with friends, perhaps. But outside of that, from city trade, chat, and all that, you're cut off. But I like the idea of being able to have a mobile device, if you want to look at it that way, and communicating back with the city. But if some storm was to come up where you're out adventuring or whatever, your service becomes very unreliable.
Right.
I think, again, back to the whole life in the virtual world. Because what if... And again, this is completely doable. So for anyone who's listening, don't think I'm off my rocker. We could come up with a simple random weather generation system that could be tied into the news system. You could even look to see what's the weather going to be like out.
So you get the forecast
in Shalazar.
If you're going to have weather, I mean, and if that weather has any sort of negative possibility, because WoW right now, weather's just an effect.
Yeah.
If it's on or off, it doesn't make any difference other than you see pretty raindrops. But if it has the possibility of affecting anything about your character, then you need a forecast.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, because Jason and I were talking. I was already planning out a weather system to help drive the generation of the terrain itself.
But we're not going to get into discussion on that here. Okay, is there anything else? So again, the big things. One, developers, us, define where land is for sale and not for sale. so that we can keep it all separated and kind of nice looking. 2, I'm thinking land is sold by some sort of agents, so you'd want to go into a city and find an agent to. Now, you could, of course, peruse kiosks, or if you have a mobile device or whatever, you can peruse what types of things are for sale and all, but you basically need to make a purchase from some sort of agent.
Here's another one to expand on that a little bit. For some of the high-profile tracts of land, particularly for the guild-type purchases, having it be based off of an interview process, where they really do have to apply to buy a piece of land, and one of the GMs has to approve that sale.
I really would try to avoid any requirement for hands-on from the GMs whenever possible.
Yeah, that one might be just a little bit
too much.
Okay.
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
I was thinking it's almost like a credit check in a way.
Yeah.
Just prevent a new guild. Oh, yeah, we're going to buy that. No, you're not going to buy it. You don't have the resources.
Well, an easy way to handle that, of course, you can monitor all the resources that they have. You can say, in order to buy an area as a guild, you have to have at least 20 members. And, sorry, Nelson, if these members had a particular level, you have to have, like, say, an average level of X. That's if we had a system that employed levels. We're not talking about characters now. But I think there's ways you could have that quote-unquote
automated
credit check be
it
the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Where
you got to put up so much gold. And,
like right now, in order to keep people who don't need to be in the high-end dungeons out of those dungeons right now in WoW, they have the item level thing, and they say you got to have item level 335 or whatever to even set foot in this dungeon. Cool. You do the same thing with your land. You have to have a guild with X amount of people who are at an average of this, this degree of growth before you even qualify.
And they're even
we can just
doing
work
that. They're even doing that now in WoW with guilds. Yeah, with guild perks.
There were a couple of things that I had that we didn't really get a chance to talk to, and I realized we kind of need to wrap this up because we wanted to keep these videos shorter than this one already has become.
Well, real estate's a big one. I mean, we can wrap this and do a 20-minute additional one if need be.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's call a quick break, and if the next video is only 10 minutes of me getting a few ideas out, then fine.
So it is. Okay, all right, so that will wrap up this one. We'll catch you guys in the next part of this video. Thanks a lot.